Hey gang, Volty here. Today I'm going to be talking about a TCG that I've been invited to test for. It's a very small group of alpha testers at the moment, but the game is due to come out in the early months of 2025. There'll be a little bit of Wildhearts content coming out on the channel, but obviously I'll make sure there's plenty of 7-Point Highlander and Magic content for you all to enjoy. So let's talk about this game. It's called Wildhearts TCG. There is also going to be World of Wildhearts, which is a TTRPG. Both of these are going to be set in the same world, but will obviously be very different mechanical games. So let's talk about the TCG and why I'm really excited to be part of the team who's testing for it, and what I think it's got going for it. So first things first, the basic structure of the game is that there are 3 lanes. Each of those lanes will have a field on them with a dedicated amount of victory points that you can earn at the end of the round. There will be 4 rounds unless someone gets to the required victory point threshold prior to that, which is 20. As you can see here, this field is worth 4, and at the end of the round, after you go back and forth, if you have more points or more stats on that field, then you'll earn the 4 points up the top. There are other ways to gain victory points, although for the most part those are minor effects that add 1, maybe 2 at a maximum, so you really are fighting for the fields and the board slots, much like Gwent or Marvel Snap, for example. So what are we putting down onto our fields? Well, when you're building your deck, you're going to choose 2 familiars, and those are going to be units that you can deploy every round for free. In addition, you'll also have allies, so this is much like champions and minions in Legends of Runeterra, for example, or a commander and a creature in Magic. The familiars are all very different, and they're based off their color identity, and each of them will appear in your deck. They'll decide what colors your deck is and what cards you can put into your deck, and they'll also give you a rough outline on what your strategy could be. So for example, we have Ferrotoon on the left here. When it comes into play, you'll draw a card. However, if you have more magic units on that particular lane, then you can draw multiple cards and keep one of them into your hand. Additionally, every time you gain a 3rd, 6th, or 9th resource, which are like the lands or the mana system, you'll also get a victory point. Chrism on the right here is very basic. You can see the number up the top there is 8. It's a massively statted unit, and it's one of those things where you're very clearly designed or trying to put a lot of stats in play, defend a lane, and hope to get the victory points at the end of the round. There are 4 colors, so to speak, within the game. Each of them has, an identity associated with them. For example, we have green, or I think it's called Might, which is what Chrism is. It's very akin to green in Magic, or Demacia in Runeterra. You're playing overstated minions, you're trying to get on the board, and you're trying to fight for your victory points. We have in the top left orange, which is Tactics. Tactics is much like Ionia, or blue, I guess you'd call it. There's a lot of interaction. There's a lot of ways to move your units around. And there's a couple of ways you can filter your hand or increase your stats on the board, or move your lanes, for example. Blue in the bottom left is Special. This is much more like blue. You're usually playing understated minions or expensive spells that allow you to generate resources or allow you to generate advantages that you can then convert into more concrete value later on. And then we have Ferocity, which is the purple in the bottom right. This is most akin to black, I would say, where you're typically spending some amount of resources to gain an advantage. So for example, if you play a unit, it might ask you to discard a card in order to get extra stats, or you might sacrifice a unit to get some kind of benefit. So far, the two starter decks have been Special and Might, so blue-green, and Tactics and Ferocity. These are the ones that we've been testing with recently, and you can see how the different color combinations would work. Special uses the small units that generate incremental value to offset the blunt nature of Might, and Tactics and Ferocity allow you to generate minor advantages and move your units around, especially when they're overstated units that require you to discard cards or spend resources. Lastly, we have my card reveal. This is Lunas. It's an ally, so it's not going to be one of your champions or your commanders. It is just going to be a unit in the deck. However, it's really, really powerful when I read the card and I think about how the games play out, which we'll go through once I start making a bit more targeted content with some screenshots. It's a really high impact effect for what you're paying for it. So the 3 up the top left is the cost. So this is going to cost 3 mana or 3 crystals or 3 resources, and you're going to get at a minimum 4 points of stats. This is a bit lower than average. For the most part, 3 gives you about 5, maybe 5.5. However, when it comes into play or when it debuts, you get to choose 2 of the following. So you can draw 2 cards, you can make it bigger and make it 6, you can KO an opposing ally on the lane that you're playing it on. Notably, you can't blow up a familiar, so you can't blow up a champion, but anything that your opponent has spent mana on and as an ally that's generated effect, you can blow that up. Or you can gain block, which is essentially a shield counter, I guess, or I can't remember the word for the bubbles in Eternal, but Aegis, I think it was. Basically, the next time that something would target Lunas, it won't work, and then it'll lose block. If you do decide to choose to KO an opposing ally, the second trigger will happen, which is when you KO something, you get to take a support resource from your opponent. This basically means you get to take one of their lands or one of their mana sources, and you can put it onto your stack instead. This is really high impact, but 3 mana is a lot of mana in this game. The way the mana system works is that you start with 1 land. At the start of every round, you can play one of your cards as another mana source, and then there are other ways you can generate temporary mana or accelerate your mana so that you can play this earlier. I would expect most of the time you'll play this to KO an opposing ally and draw 2 cards. If you have enough gas in the tank, you'll probably KO an opposing ally and make it a 3/6, but otherwise gaining block and having a 3/4 is also very reasonable. If your opponent doesn't have any good allies and you just need the stats in play, you can also make it a 3/6 stat line with block, which is also quite powerful. So it's a really exciting card. I'm super interested to see how it plays out in the game. Hopefully we can move on from the starter deck soon in terms of the alpha testing team that we have, but otherwise, look out for the game. I'm going to put some links in the comments below. So if you want to check out the page and make sure that you're updated when the Kickstarters happen, you can do that. But otherwise, like I said, there's going to be some Wildhearts content coming up. I'm really excited to be working with the team. And in the meantime, catch you all later.